Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wine Wednesday. I'm Kevin Addix. We are rolling with a cold open. I couldn't get our video running, so here we go. Welcome to Wine Wednesday and the Maryland Wineries Association interview, where each week we talk with someone really, really cool about local wine. And this week, true to form, we have someone really, really cool. I'd like to bring up Rachel Lipman of Loew Vineyards. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So this winery has been around since just about the beginning of Maryland wine. You know, kind of the I say kind of the 1.5 phase of Maryland wine in the 80s. But that's not where the history of Loew Vineyards and its wine started. Give us the backstory.
So the backstory is from my grandfather, William Loew. He and my grandmother, they started the winery here in Maryland. But my grandfather, he had a really unique family that had many wineries or meaderies. Really, they produced mead, and it was really prominent. And over 3 meaderies in Europe, and between World War I and World War II, they were unfortunately demolished. So wine has been in my family commercially since at least 1870. So that makes me a 5th generation winemaker, or mead maker at least. And as a reconnection or tribute to my grandfather's roots, in, I guess it was 1992, that's when we purchased the land and then planted vines at Sprung. So we're the 4th oldest existing winery in Maryland, and my grandparents are some of the early pioneers in this industry, and I've learned so much from them. So
Bill and Lois, grandfather and grandmother, have been extremely involved in the local wine scene and the Wineries Association. In fact, your grandmother, I think for nearly 10 years, was the secretary of the organization. So she, I know when I started, she was already the secretary and came on for another couple of terms. And really kind of the two of them cheerleaded the growth of the industry. And we're very open in helping others get started. How core has the mead been from the beginning? Did they start with mead, or did they start with wine and then introduce the mead?
I think it was kind of hand in hand almost. So the vines were planted in 1982. The first vintage was released in 85. Or the first vintage we had was in 85. The first vintage release was in 86. And kind of along with that, as they were able to kind of experiment and to figure out what types of meads we were going to be producing. That's kind of how it went along. So the meads like pine mints, so meads that are made with, instead of water, they are used with grape juice, which is our honey and grape in our legacy. And that has, we've been making those for many, many years. But I think in the interim between when we first released our first bottle of wine, so in 86, my grandfather had been trying and making different recipes. And once we kind of decided on the honey and grape, or he decided on the honey and grape, it kind of went from there. So it was something that we have as our own family recipe secret, and no one's going to find out about it. I'm not allowed to share it. And, we really pride ourselves on those wines.
So this is not the video chat. You're going to give away the recipe.
No, I'm not allowed to. I will never, and I would choose not to. I think every meadery, it's kind of like almost like not like making beer, but you have all these different ways of making the product. And with wine, I think a lot of times there's a collaboration in terms of other producers saying they use this yeast, they use that yeast, and for us, we've kind of figured out our own thing where our pine mints are different than other ones. So our ratios and our recipe is pretty sacred to us.
So you mentioned the honey and grape, but recently you released, and I fell in love with it, the Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that.
So Legacy is essentially similar to honey and grape, besides the fact that it's entirely dry. There's no residual sugar. And it was really fun because I guess it was 2019. My cousin Ellie and I had been, she actually started helping me make meads, with our grandfather. And, when wines go through fermentations, it's predictable up until a certain point. We've, I think, maintained with our pine mints, especially specific standards that they're of quality, that there's no variation. And the Legacy, did the same thing. However, the buckets of wildflower we separated the fermentations, and the buckets of wildflower for the ones that went into Legacy had this really awesome, like mandarin orange and like almost a little bit of a nuttiness to it. And the funny thing is, it's not funny, but the cool thing is that with honey, just like grapes, you can, each bucket of honey tastes different. So we cherry picked the buckets, and then the fermentation carried through. So we were able to separate what we wanted to use for, potentially a dry pine mint, and it ended up working out really well. So from there on, it's become, we released it in August of last year, and it's become a pretty important part of our program.
You point out something that I don't think often about. I grew up with honey being honey.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a one flavor product. It's honey. And then you start, you go to a gourmet shop or go to a farmer's market and start seeing wildflower honey. And then from there, it just goes 1,000 different ways, blueberry honey and all this. And it's not made with blueberries. It's made from bees working very hard pollinating blueberries,
mm-hmm.
or raspberries or sorghum or whatever it might be. Or whatever it might be. Yeah. Yeah. So that's very cool.
It's pretty interesting because, we make our meads. Oh, let me, I think it's a package. I just have to hold the phone.
While you're packaging, I'll tell a quick story.
Hold on 1 second.
So Joe Fiola last week was talking about the spotted lanternfly and kind of its impact on vineyards. Folks who harbor bees and tend to bees and keep bees are noticing that bees are coming back with this unique flavor. So Rachel, I'm talking about how the spotted lanternfly exudes kind of a sticky sap, a sugary sticky sap as a waste product. And bees in Pennsylvania are attracted to it.
Oh, that's funny.
And so the honey is now starting to taste different because the bees are eating lanternfly excretions.
Yeah, that's
that's nature for you.
Yeah, that's what honey kind of is anyway, excretions in a sense. Yeah. But I don't really want to use that unless it's like somehow superior.
Hey, it might be delicious, but it's different.
I don't know. I actually, so we use Apex Bee Company's honey basically exclusively. And we've really, over the past few years, really have enjoyed working with their honey. And my goal is I keep trying to convince, the apist, the guy who owns the apiary, to grow linden trees. And linden trees are don't exist really in the US in terms of, linden honey, commercial production. So he's on the lookout because mead has been so interesting to me, and I've really done a lot of research about it. And when I was interviewing my grandfather, I asked him about linden honey because there were all these documents, these old Polish documents that kind of started asking, or not asking. They were saying that linden honey is like gold, and so I asked him about it. He goes, "Oh, that makes the best mead." So. Really? I've been trying to convince this beekeeper he's on the lookout. So he promised me.
So what he would plant an orchard or yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They grow very slowly. So it's a long-term process, but it's very coveted. And so I'm really hoping that he can get a hold of some. If not, I will try to plant some, and have no interest really in working with bees, just because there's a lot of other things that we're doing.
Yeah, but you want that honey that bad.
Yeah, it's I would really love to see what it's like and to work with it. You don't see it very often at all. Not even like the European honeys, you don't really see it. So
Rachel, how did you get started? Because I just from where you are now, which is you're making wine and you're managing not only your vineyard but helping other folks with their vineyards. How did you get started? What piqued your interest? When, as a kid or as a teen or as a young adult, did you say, "Yep, I want to do this"?
So I grew up in this industry, like Melissa at Linden Honey or Julian from Elk Run. I grew up with the Maryland Wine Festival and the Westminster and the Maryland Wine Festival and Wine in the Woods. And those were like big family reunions for me. And with all my cousins and family friends, and, we'd see them, the twice a year, obviously my family more, but certain people we would see just twice a year. We had an accordion player that would walk around our tent. I don't know if you remember him. I loved that. I wanted to play the accordion for many years after. And it was just a really positive way of coming to the vineyard on every Sunday or as many times as we came. And then we would gather around my grandparents' kitchen table, which still has that blue tablecloth. And, I'm the oldest grandchild. I'm currently the only one who's interested in it and as a career. And it was a really kind of thing that I had asked myself. I always knew that the vineyard, I wanted it to be in my life and the winery to be in my life. I just didn't know exactly what was possible, because I grew up with seeing at the wine festivals, men with their mustaches. They had white hair. So I thought, okay, I have to be around that age for me to be able to be working in a vineyard or owning a winery. And so I thought, okay, well, I have to then have a certain career that will somehow carry. And I had this whole mindset when I was younger. And it wasn't until my high school guidance counselor had said to me, well, you really love the vineyard so much. I want to write you a nice college recommendation, but I don't know if you can go, let's see if you can go into wine. Let's see if that exists. And sure enough, there were programs that did plant science and, things towards enology and viticulture. And so from there, it kind of went like that. And a light switch went off, and it's just been a full force since. So I've been in every aspect of the industry. I've seen retail, distributing, I've worked in labs, I've worked in vineyards in France. I've traveled a lot. I mean, I've been able to get myself in every facet. So it's been pretty cool.
So you go get yourself educated, you get some gigs selling wine, and obviously you've been helping the family make wine. What if someone were to walk in to Loew Vineyards, who's been going to Loew Vineyards for the last 30 years? What's your stamp? How can they see your influence?
It's interesting because the way that I was taught wine from my grandfather, from working in France, is very, it's more European. My grandfather's European, so that would make sense. I mean, very minimal, and you really are. So his influence on me is very much so like that. Mm-hmm. My personality is pretty, I guess, high energy, and very specific, I guess. And, with the technical background and professionally tasting wine and knowing what's varietally characteristic and what's true to itself, I think where I come in is just that youthfulness of some of the wines. I think there's a balance between the tradition and the things that are new, having wines that are a little bit more bold or powerful, and ours, I think, are kind of a little daintier and a little bit more, expressive in a sense. we have a Chardonnay that's totally expressive. I mean, it's like Fruity Sauvignon Blanc. It's wild. And I think where I come in is more of just, it's a little more dainty. I think that's probably the best way I can put it. Dainty, but also like, I don't know. I think that's the best way I can put it.
Well, shall we try one?
Yeah. So I have Chardonnay.
Yeah. So tell us about the Chardonnay. So this is your.
This is my second time. Yeah, 2020. It's the second time I've made Chardonnay. The third time. Well, I guess we've been making Chardonnay, off and on for many years, and I begged my grandparents to let us try, a white vinifera, and we really loved the 2019. We don't grow it on our property. We get it from a local grower. And the 2019 had like some really bright, like Jolly Rancher green apple kind of nose characteristics, and a little bit more like Chablis in style. I really personally enjoy French wines, having worked in France. And the 2020 is, if you love Sauvignon Blanc, like this is entirely up your alley. It does have some nice acidity and really good minerality, but it tapers off really nicely. We do actually all of our white wines are done in neutral barrel. For me personally, I guess this is where my personality and my grandmother's personality kind of show through. Is my grandfather always told me that when you're trying a wine, you should really understand the expression of the grape and not necessarily like just the wood. And white wines like Chardonnay holds on to oak really, really well. And if you have a neutral barrel, or you have a barrel that's been used a couple of times, you have a little bit more of that kind of slower extraction or mild infusion, in a sense, of flavor of oak. And so for this one, it's more, this is what that year showed for this variety. And it was bright mineral and lots of grapefruit, a little bit of some white nectarine and really just nice tapering on the finish.
I love it.
Yeah.
Could you hold?
Yeah, have you?
I have not tried it yet. Could you hold up the bottle so we could see it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. Here we go.
So that's a slightly modernized label. That's got the original Loew Vineyards or an earlier logo, but a little cleaner.
Yeah, it's we changed the label a bit to separate the wines that we're producing. So the Chardonnay, the Chancellor, the Serious and Vinifera wines, they have this label. Our Rosé had that label. Our Rosé is no longer here because it's sold out in 2.5 months. And so the meads are going to be the same as the Chardonnay and the Chancellor. And so we're working on getting a bunch printed. We have a lot of bottling to do. So
you don't have a huge space. So how do you manage, how many wines? 10 different wines? I
guess we have 12 right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 12 right now. It's interesting because, like we did a Nouveau, that's a short lifespan wine. So, that can easily, once it's done fermenting, we it's right out the door. Rosé doesn't stick around for too long. It's bottled in January, February. So then that goes out the door. So it's, we're pretty careful with, our Tetris and keeping things in a good organized manner, and also, where we can fill things up. And we're going to be making a lot more wine. We have to. It's wines are selling out, and it's good to have enough wine for customers that come to visit.
Yeah, obviously. More you make, more you can sell.
Yeah, exactly.
what do you have for wine number 2?
So wine number 2 is Chancellor, the one that you really love so much. It's a 2020. From this vintage, the vines were about 30. I guess they're 38 years old from that vintage. So now they're on their 39th vintage. Yeah, they're pretty gnarly. I really love working with them. I'm like the only one who I allow to really work in the vineyard with them. Typically the way that we've been producing it is a little lighter, more like a Pinot Noir Gamay. And it just tends to work more and better in that Burgundy category. And this one was barrel aged in 50% new Hungarian oak for about 6-7 months, and it's really beautiful. I mean, it's showcasing some nice, a little bit more earthy than the other one that we had in 2017, but it has a little bit more extracted, but it's still really nice and a little lighter.
So I love your comparison to Pinot, because I think, I've had a lot of Chancellor in my writings and travelings up and down the East Coast and into Ohio, and people are making it generally to try to be the big, bold red.
I think that's the one thing that you see, especially on the East Coast. Maybe not as much in New York because there is some Pinot Noir being grown there. And I guess there's some Pinot Noir being grown in Maryland too. But there's what I've seen, personally at least, is you see every single variety that's being produced, almost, being produced in a way that is as big and bold like Napa as you can. And you have to work with the grape to its true nature. And that's, something that my grandfather has also instilled, and working in France, I learned that too. I mean, you have to work with the variety, not against the variety. And when you do these very long macerations, like oak aging them for, 2 years, you're accomplishing, maybe the style that you're trying to achieve, but it might not be as true to form as what the variety can handle. And what I've noticed with Chancellor is when you treat it in a kind of more gentle way and you don't over extract it, you allow it to just be itself. It, as a hybrid, it technically does have a little bit of that kind of pink flesh in a sense, where it juices pretty well. But, we do a short maceration time on it, as long as it really needs to, then we press it, and then we finish the fermentation off really in barrel. And that's really worked out well for us. And I personally, I think this is the best way to do it. A little bit lighter.
Well, I think and I've seen this with a couple of the what I'll call older hybrids, that if you treat them differently, I've watched our wineries evolve their thinking on Chambourcin, where they tried to make Chambourcin into a Cabernet or Cab Franc. But if you let it do what it wants to do, and you're a little more hands off, you're getting these really pretty, floral, aromatic, really nice wines. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think with any variety. I mean, I'm pretty against over extraction in general. It's just from tasting so many wines and really loving European wines, and really, when you ask any other European producer from France, from Austria, from Switzerland, I mean, they work with what they have and they don't manipulate. And that's, I think, the big deal. And I think, when people try it, that's when they really are getting, otherwise, like Malbec can taste like Cab, Malbec can taste like Merlot, it can taste like Syrah. Like there's so many, like Malbec as a variety is kind of like that chameleon, but when you treat it like the way that you see usually in like Cahors, and, from the examples I've tried, it's much more minimal. And I mean, I can pick it apart in blind tasting. I can't pick out most Malbec and Argentinian that are from Argentina. So it's
interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah. Everyone has a blind spot, but yeah.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting point. So when is it time, and this is more of a winemaking philosophy, question, but when is it time to intervene?
Well, it really depends on how you're monitoring as it's fermenting, and it depends on your personality and what you're trying to achieve. When you see a certain color, that's, I think, where that's entirely based off of perspective and what people are really looking to try to get. I mean, for me, my grandfather has always said, it's around this type of maceration time that you're going to stick with. And, if the color's not there especially for vinifera, it's, you kind of have to, extend it a little bit, but, sometimes it's also temperature. I mean, it depends on how you're fermenting and where you're fermenting. And, for us, for some of our reds, we were able to have certain clones and certain, I guess, batches in a sense that were at different maceration times. And that was just based off of when things were ready and how it was moving through. And so it kind of is intuitive in a sense. I've been working with my grandparents for about 10 years, doing harvests for, I don't know how long, but that's something that it just ends up becoming intuitive. It's just like when my grandfather would say, get me, to get him a wrench, I knew which wrench he wanted me to get him. It's just that intuition of understanding what
exactly, right.
Yeah. I mean, and he wouldn't say what type of wrench. He would just say, get the wrench. And I knew which one to get based off of what the situation was. And it's the same thing with grapes and fermenting.
Yeah, there's an artistry to it, and it can go artist or craftsman.
Yeah.
And the French versus maybe California style, or Argentina style. I think we're always fighting that battle. And I know in our competitions we have a lot of explaining to do sometimes when a judge is served a wine that on their score sheet says Viognier, for example, and it doesn't taste like Viognier. It's a really nice wine, but it doesn't taste like Viognier. At what point in the process of planting a vineyard, growing a vineyard, making wine, do you have a discussion that says, well, Viognier, you're not giving me what people expect.
Right.
So maybe this isn't the place for you, or.
Well, it could be the place for it. It just could be that the thing with those types of situations is the variety could be in a situation or in an environment where certain characteristics will shine through and certain ones won't. And that's just, part of nature. I mean, you can't really fight it. And that I think can be a problem in terms of, when you're tasting wine, and that's things in the industry with that is that there are things that you look for when you're trying to pick apart a wine. You want things to be in that cookie cutter mold, and you want red wines to be a certain way. You want Pinot Noir to be a certain way. There are standards for California Pinot and French Pinot. There's a reason why their extractions and their climate and the wines are just entirely different. So there's a kind of a disparity, I think, when you have a grape or variety or wine that is not to the way that you think it is, or stereotypically. And if it's a good wine and it's made well, that's all that really matters. Because otherwise, for me, I do love varietally characteristic wines, but it's a fine line. There has to be something, a little bit indicative.
Yeah, well, there needs to be some thread, some common theme among them. I guess maybe not needs to be, but I think most wine drinkers who are shopping by variety or by region, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, when I drink Gruner, if it does not have a specific aromatic that I always am looking for, then to me it's not considered what I would want to drink. whether or not it's a good wine is different, but I look for that specific aromatic. For white wines in general, I look for a specific aromatic that when I smell it, and like if it has, it's like almost like a candied nose, if it's bright, if it has some, really good, capturing notes, then, I'm drawn to it. For red wines, like there are specific characteristics that I look for personally as well. And that's partially how I grew up, with growing up, with how my grandfather enjoyed wines, how I started developing my own palate through tasting a lot of European wines. I think that's why there's so many different wines out there, because there's so many different palates and so many different people. And, otherwise wine would be boring. But I mean, I think everyone's going to say that the way that they like wine is the best way, the way that wine should be. And that's great. And it's also unfortunate. So
with reds, do you evaluate reds differently? So whites, you're looking for specific varietal aromas or characteristics. With reds, do you look for something different?
Yeah, I think, for reds, I'm a little pickier in terms of how things should be varietally characteristic. Personally, I don't like Cab Franc that's green. I don't think most people like Cab Franc that's green, although Cab Franc that has the pyrazine note does do well with fajitas. So it kind of like, it just reminds me of fajitas. I always say that.
It reminds me of fajitas for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's besides the whole sizzling aspect, but yeah. But there are certain things that I look for based off of the variety. If it's medium skinned or thick skinned, like how far you should be able to look through the glass and see like all the way through. Should you have the red stain around the glass? There are certain kind of indicators that you can look for in terms of whether or not it's the variety or whether or not it's
right.
Manipulation. And that is something that, personally, I like to support a lot of small producers, and the small producers or medium-sized producers are more hands-on, and you find a lot more authentic wines that way. Mm-hmm. With our wines, I mean, like my hands are on every bottle, basically. Yeah, because we do hand bottling, so that would make sense. But yeah, literally. So, it's interesting because, a lot of times you'll end up, I think a lot of times when people look for a Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, or a red blend from California, they look for, because of that like vintage in 2007, they look for that exact same type of wine that will remind them of that wine from 2007. And
right.
It's, and that winery, there's, some big ones. And basically it's funny because that winery is trying to mimic that same vintage all the way through.
Consistent the whole way through.
Yeah. And it's not always, it's not authentic, because a wine is indicative of what happened throughout that whole entire year. There is really no weather pattern that has been the exact same, we've learned, right, for a whole entire year after year after year. And so the only thing that you can mimic is quality, but not that flavor or taste unless you manipulate it. So for me, like I'm very passionate again about it. And Jacqueline Fiola actually just sent me a text message. She's probably listening to this, and she's saying, "I'm laughing at your Cab Franc conversation. No green Cab Franc." She's not a big Cab Franc person, but I'm trying to convert her because mine doesn't have green notes to it. But right. Anyway, but yeah, so that was a little tangent. But
you need to have some fajitas with her.
Yeah, well, tell Joe that.
Yeah, yeah.
She's got to come visit me. Yeah. But anyway, yeah.
So you have one more wine to show us.
Yeah. So I just kind of popped the cork on my Malbec, and we bottled this Friday of last week. Yeah, we're this kind of goes along with, like, this is a 2020. We were running low on red wine in general, still kind of, don't have a lot of red wine to sell. We have a lot, more in the cellar, and we're working our way through it. But this is for going to the point of working with the variety. This has been barrel aged for like what, 7-8 months, and so it's not in barrel for 24 months. Not in barrel. It's not over extracted. So this is my Malbec. It has that really kind of bright. My Aunt Jen, actually, when I sent them pictures of when we were pressing it, she goes, "That looks electric." And I can see all the way through the bottom of the glass. I mean, you probably can't because there's the
yeah, I can see
light, but it's to me, Malbec is medium to thick skinned. It's not like Cab. For me, it's between it's above Grenache, it's below Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's like almost equal with Merlot. And Merlot is not one of those types of varieties that should be, to me personally, over extracted or really, really full bodied. Like when you have Bordeaux, you can see through the glass. So anyway, this one was barrel aged in 50% new oak with French and American oak for, I guess, 7 to 8 months or so. And it has a lot of like boastful tannin, and it reminds me of a producer that I became very good friends with from France. And it was the first time we worked with Malbec, and my grandmother, when they tried it, she says 5 stars with the emoji. Yeah. And my grandfather really loved it. And so it's going to sit some time in the bottle. It needs a label, and probably in June we'll release it. So I'm excited for that. But
yeah,
it's
sign me up for that. That just your description sounds great, and it looks beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it is.
So any idea what you'll charge for it?
It'll be $27 a bottle. So
what is your price range? Is that on the high end?
That's probably the highest that we have. We'll have once it's released. So it ranges between, I think, 18 and 27 for this one.
Okay.
And then we have a couple more reds that we're releasing, red fruit in Maryland, just for purchasing from good growers that we have good relationships with. Fruit is not cheap. There's a demand of it, in a very high demand and very low supply in Maryland. And so in terms of vinifera, it's hard to get. People are snatching it up, and so we work with a few growers that have really given us some really great quality, and I'm working with a couple to be able to plant their vineyards or their land so that they can have fruit for us as well. But yeah, this has been really fun for us, the Malbec.
I see a comment from Phil that he would definitely like a bottle of that Malbec. Phil, you can go first. I'll get in line after you.
Yeah, he's going to be here on Sunday. We have a fun Mother's Day event planned.
Great.
Yeah, he's a glass blower. It's awesome.
Well, I have a sense that Phil's going to try and get an unlabeled bottle from you.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're allowed to.
I know. Well, he can certainly try it, maybe.
Yeah, maybe
but
that's tape.
So, what's the future hold in terms of styles of wine, and what's happening with the winery? And
there's a lot happening. I mean, I'm my head spins like every day almost. We're making more wine. We're holding more events on our property. We're doing, the events that we're holding are not like free-for-alls. They're really thoughtful, curated events. We have a wine club now. We started in 2020, which was fun timing during the pandemic. But we
got to start somewhere.
And at some point anyway, and we had been kind of like, wrestling over what we wanted to do for it for a couple of years. And, the goal is to continue our legacy of producing wine and showcasing the history. I mean, every time someone comes to our winery, whether or not, I'm usually like 99% of the time I'm here of every weekend. And we have a way to be able to share our history with customers. It's for us, it's really important that we're able to share why we're in wine. It's not just because we like drinking wine. I mean, we are a big wine drinking family, but our history is really deep rooted, and it's complicated, and it's a really fantastic legacy that I'm hoping to, and I think my whole family, we're all hoping to continue. And with that comes with producing wines that we really, truly love. We're located in Mount Airy, Maryland. Nicole, I just see that little thing pop up, but we're on Route 26. But our goal is to continue to produce the meads and really showcase them. We have some fun things under our belt to showcase them, and then French and Austrian based varieties is what we're looking for and what we're going to be doing. And then Chancellor, which is my grandfather, one of his favorite varieties. It's especially on our property. It's one that I really love, and I've connected with, and my grandmother loves, and it really fills that need where we can have the Burgundy and the Bordeaux. It fills a whole wine list. And so it's, and plus those vines are 39 years old at this point. I mean, that's incredible. The fact that they're full producing. It's, I don't know very many other vineyards on the East Coast that have vineyards that old and that are still doing so well. So, anytime people want to come visit, we have self-guided tours. We have a map that people can walk through as long as they don't touch them, the vines. It's,
don't mess with my vines. Yeah.
Let me have my fruit. You want to have wine, right? So, it's a really unique history that we have, and I'm so proud of it. And people who work here are proud of it, and my family's proud of it. And we just want to continue and have a future. So with that comes with more wine. And we're, I think, grappling with, first time we did a Malbec, we loved it. Now it's in our program. It's not going to hopefully ever go away. So there's different aspects that, we're planning on working on.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of very cool stuff happening. I would encourage people to get out there if you've been to Loew before and tried their wines and enjoyed their wines. Yeah, I mean, you got to get back. You got to get back and check things out, because Rachel's made she's having some big influence, which is very cool to see that. So it's great seeing you and Melissa at Linganore and you mentioned Jacqueline Fiola. Joe was on last week. It's so great seeing, the next generation rising through the ranks and putting their fingerprints on stuff, which is great.
It's cool because with Melissa and I and Jacqueline and Julian and we've grown up with this. We've seen we've been included in all these different aspects of the business, and there's a lot of tradition that goes along with it. But it's really fun to be able to see, we're the youngest in the industry, but yet we probably have some of the most experience. So it's a really interesting balance that, it'll be really cool to see how all of us do future, just because it's a long tenure in a short amount of time.
Well, Rachel, that's a good closing line. Thank you very much for being on. Thanks
for having me.
And say hi to the grandparents.
Yeah, they're watching, so you can say hi to them virtually.
Excellent. Well, hi to the grandparents. It's great to have you on. Great to have you involved. And we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, and everyone's welcome to come. And you have to come visit.
I need to come back and visit when I'm not.
Yeah, we have a fun event June 6th. You should come to that.
When I'm not racing through. Yeah. Well, send me details. I would love to. Okay. One last comment here. Cassandra, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks.
Rachel, thanks.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, I got to plug our wine competition. Excuse me, our Wine Explorer Club, which is very cool because we have this brand new Wine Explorer Club that is now in its 4th offering. And you can go to marylandwine.com to learn more and to log on to the Explorer Club. What you do, just like a winery has its clubs, the Wineries Association has put together its own club, collecting some of the best wines from around the state. What's really interesting about this latest release, and you can get red pack, a white pack, or we have a sweet and dessert wine pack this go around, and you can subscribe or you can just buy it a la carte. We've pulled some double gold winning wine. So these are all wines that won kind of the best in classes in the last wine competition. So you're getting really good stuff, and you don't have to travel to get it. And we put notes, tasting notes, and pairing suggestions and all kinds of things in there. So with that, again, thank you all very much for joining, and we will see you next time.